2017 Nissan Altima 2.5 liter P0171. We are here to determine, is the problem an air problem, a fuel problem, or a BS problem? If you don't know what BS means, hit me up and I'll explain it. I'm using the ATS E-scan. It's a great tool. This video is not meant to knock the tool. I'm simply doing this for two reasons. One, to fix this car, and two, to kind of show a weakness. Weakness might not be the right word, but a vulnerability of the software. Anytime you go into the sharpshooter tab, it's taking inputs from the car's computer and making decisions and graphing things out in nice little boxes and everything else for you. And we're going to go through all that. It's at the mercy of the inputs from the car, just like the ECU is. So, if we're getting shitty or bad inputs, we're going to get bad outputs. So keep that in mind. I'm probably letting the cat out of the bag a little early, but that's what this video is about, and I think we're all going to learn something. All right, so what we've done is we have hit the sharpshooter tab, and the first thing I like to do is hit the fuel trim tab. Anytime I'm dealing with a fuel trim code, I like to figure out, is it an air problem, a fuel problem, or do I have feedback sensors lying? Hence the BS. Now, under the sharpshooter tab, this thing is taking all the information it's getting from the ECM and it's processing it, and it's spitting out these nice pretty graphs for you. It is at the mercy of the info it's taking in order to give you something out. Okay, so bear that in mind throughout this whole video. So here we go. Right here we have throttle position, and here we have revolutions per minute. So what we're doing is we're just taking a nice little test drive. You don't have to hold it to the wood. You just need to try to fill in boxes. You know, the more of these boxes that fill in, the more the software can process and the better it can give you feedback. So here we go. So we're down here at idle. When we're at idle up to 1800, this thing is green, meaning fuel trims are good. As we start accelerating, we're giving it throttle here, and the RPMs are coming up. Then the fuel trims start going bad. Orange is bad, red is worse. And we're adding fuel, adding fuel, adding fuel, adding fuel. So that tells me that the motor's lean. At this point, now ask yourself every time I show you a slide, is it air, fuel, or BS? At this point, my answer is, I'm not sure yet. I need to do another test. So what I'm going to do throughout this whole thing is I'm going to show you the bad, and then I'm going to show you the good. This is after the car's fixed. I'm not going to tell you what I did to it yet, but we're going to get to that. So when it's fixed, idle, going up through the RPMs, everything is green. Green is good. Here we go, bad. So with what we're seeing right now, I'm already thinking at idle or low engine, I'm not really demanding a lot of the fuel system, but as I demand more, I'm getting leaner. So option A, do I have a weak fuel pump, some restrictions in injectors, things like that? Or on the air side, do I have an under-reporting mass airflow? Meaning the engine's getting more air than it's being reported. And as more air flows with more RPM, I'm getting leaner and leaner and leaner. Right now, I can't answer either one of those questions, but I do know that I'm good at idle, mid-throttle, and I'm lean as more energy is needed to get the car going. So right now, I don't have an answer, but I'm collecting data. This is what we're doing. And like I said, that's good, and we'll reveal that at the end. Hang on. next test. All right, so what I've done now is I've clicked the volumetric efficiency tab. Inside of the software, there's a pre-programmed model for most cars that I've worked on, so that's pretty cool. And that would be the red trace. You need to go over here and you need to make sure your engine size is correct, your outside air temperature is correct, and your elevation for whatever area you work in. I've already done that. Then you hit test or start. It would say start. And now I want you to go out and I want you to drive it and I want you to hold it to the wood. I don't know how much experience you guys have with CVT transmissions, but they don't really shift. You just hold it to the wood. It really doesn't wind the motor up real tight like a regular transmission that you could put in, say, low 1 and then wind it up. If you do these in low 1, they hit the rev limiter, and when you hit the rev limiter, it kind of screws this up. So I just leave them in drive. I hold them to the wood and see what I see. I've done volumetric efficiency tests on hundreds of 2.5 liter Nissan engines, and I can tell you about 140 is about what you're going to get out of these motors. So the red is a model, the yellow is my car. So you can see the red, it's a skosh over 140, and my car's coming in just a little bit under 140. I'm going to tell you, I'm not worried about that little discrepancy. This car I'm working on has 149,000 miles on it. So I'm sure there's a little wear in this engine. This test is basically telling me that my engine has the ability to move air in and out. The graph is telling me that I do not have a clog converter, because if I have a clog converter, if I can't get air out, I'm not going to get air in. It's also telling me that my mass airflow sensor is reporting correctly, because I'm not under-reporting, because it is really, really close. Now, guys, you don't need this tool to do a volumetric efficiency test. You can put an app on your phone. ATG makes a nice app and it's free. A regular scan tool and a good app will do this for you. I like the tool. I'm not promoting the tool. I'm not getting paid to sell the tool. I just like the tool. But none of what I'm doing here, and in fact, for 20 years, I've figured out fuel trim problems before I bought this tool. So it can be done. The tool just makes it a little nicer. So with that being said, this test right here shows me that I can mark an airflow problem off my list. I am no longer worried about air. I am still concerned about fuel delivery, and I'm still concerned about BS. Now, the next tab I'm going to push is VE Total Fuel Trim Compare. What it's going to do is the first chart we looked at with all the little blocks, it's going to graph that, and it's going to graph this in a nice cool graph, and it's going to show you the volumetric efficiency laid over top of the fuel trim. And that to me is the graph that really seals the deal when I'm thinking air or fuel. So that little gap right there, which is roughly, I don't know, 5 grams per second different, I am not losing any sleep over that. It's not going to bother me in the least. Now let's look at the known good. Now this is after the car's fixed. Well, we can see that my yellow mark is still pushing right about 140, and this is a fixed car. And my little yellow mark is really close to 140, and it's a broken car. And I can assure you I did nothing to the airflow side of this engine to fix it. So that is the volumetric efficiency. I am definitely looking towards fuel, and I'm not ruling out BS. Air is good. So what I've done is I've clicked the next tab and go over that. And all it's doing is laying this test over top of this test on this graph. So the yellow is my fuel trim. Now, if you remember back on the first capture or the first slide I had where it was green down low and got red as we accelerated, well, that's what this is showing you. Here's zero trim. The more I accelerated, the redder it got, and that's what it's telling me. This is adding fuel. Now, I know the mass airflow is not underreporting because, for one, my VE test looked good. And this just tells me the same thing. Even at its peak, remember I showed you the little difference between the red and the yellow? Well, that's here, and then it gets better. So if I was underreporting right in here, my fuel trim would still be climbing. But see, my air is actually getting better, and my fuel is still climbing. So this tells me, along with the VE, that I do not have an air problem. I have a fuel. This looks exactly like a fuel delivery issue. And that's the other point of this video. So let me go over the good one real quick. Now the car's fixed. Same deal. Here's my fuel trim. Here's my air. Even at the peak of the difference of the air, which is that gap between the red and the yellow, it's about 18% difference. So if I'm underreporting by that much, my fuel trim should be going rich, but they're not. They're actually going lean. Even at their peak, they're only 3% add. So right in here, I mean, and then as the motor is accelerating even more, my air is even getting closer to theoretical. So anytime you would see the air getting worse, meaning it's underreporting, you would also see the fuel trim mirroring it, because as it's underreporting air, it's getting more air. The feedback system is saying, yo, I need more fuel. So they would kind of almost be parallel. Well, you can see here that the air is a little off, which we talked about, but the fuel trim is just barely off. I mean, it added just a little bit. We're talking 3%, and then the air actually gets better. So this tool is showing me right now, beyond the shadow of a doubt, this car has a fuel problem. This is where the area between your ears has to be sharper than the sharpshooter. Because I can tell you, if you take this car back to the shop and you put a fuel gauge on it, you're going to find it's perfect. If you take a fuel sample checking for ethanol or any other contaminants, you're going to find it's perfect. If you really wanted to waste some time and do fuel injector drop tests, you're going to find that they're all the same. And then you're going to be scratching your head, what the hell? This thing just told me it was a fuel problem, which it is. The sharpshooter is at the mercy of the inputs it's fed. So if it's being fed BS, then everything we've talked about is going to be BS. The only thing I've believed out of this whole presentation so far is the air. That's not the end of the world, because I'm going to show you how to get around that. This is a trick. It's not a trick. It's a maybe well-known fact you probably already know. You need to get out of the sharpshooter. I am not kicking the sharpshooter around. I'm not disrespecting it. I'm just saying the tool is reporting on what it has been told, just like the car's ECU. This car's ECU is making bad decisions because it's getting bad inputs. The sharpshooter is making bad decisions because it's getting bad inputs. So what we're going to do on the next slide is I'm going to show you how to get around that. And what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to hit the PIDs tab. I'm going to click a very few PIDs. You can do this with any scan tool. And we're going to find out real quick and in a hurry if our AF sensor and our rear O2 are lying, and we're going to find out real quick if our fuel system is good. So if you stuck with me this long, hang on, the cat's coming out of the bag. All right, so I went into the PID list, and just like any scan tool, if you shorten the PIDs list down, you get a better response. So what I've done is I picked RPM, I picked front. It's an air-fuel ratio sensor, not an oxygen sensor. The rear is an oxygen sensor, and then I picked throttle position. I usually don't pick that, but I wanted to do it for the YouTube, you know, because you guys need to see everything. What I need you to do is I need you to take this car out one more time with these selected PIDs, and I need you to hold this thing to the wood. And when I mean to the wood, it needs to go to the floor. Because what happens then? The car goes into full enrichment. It ignores all feedback. It is not trimming anything. It goes to full enrichment. So what that tells me is you got to use your butt meter too. Now, is the car accelerating, misfiring, acting like a fool, or is it getting on up the road? My butt meter said this car is running great. The other thing it tells you is all the oxygen sensors, although the feedback's not working, they're still reading, and we get to see that. And now we can tell if the oxygen or AF sensors are lying, and we can get a good idea of our fuel system. So let me explain. So what I've done is I've taken a screenshot, and you can drag this little blue cursor anywhere you want. So I just stuck it right there, and that's going to give me the value of everything in that line. So disregard the big number, look at the little number. So where that little arrow is 5,562 RPMs. If you kind of draw an imaginary line down, I'm at 89.8% throttle. I think it had thick floor mats because I'm pretty sure I had her to the wood. I tell any of my guys, when you're doing this test, put the front AF sensor on top, put the rear O2 on the bottom. If these things are working correctly, this one should drop. Pretend like this is a fence and these guys are neighbors. So under wide open, this guy should come down. This guy should go up. They should sit in the middle and say, how you doing? Then when the wife calls, you let off the throttle. It cuts fuel. Everybody should go lean. The wife calls. You got to go back home. So immediately you jump lean, you jump lean. That's all fine and dandy. Check this out. I'm at wide open. What did this front AF sensor do? It did nothing. I can tell you 2.20 is perfect stoic on this car. So I'm idling, barely driving, and it's reading the same. I go wide open. Look at my rear O2. My rear O2 is 0.97. That bad boy is getting all the fuel it wants. It is full rich. That tells me right off the bat, my fuel pump can keep up. My injectors are spraying. The car is running great. My butt meter says it's running great. The graph says it's running great. My front AF sensor is not responding. Here is the BS. This bad boy is reading. The computer knows it should be rich here, but it's not. Remember, AF sensors, when they drop, they are rich. This guy is still reading at wide open the same as he is out in here where I'm barely moving. So the computer is sending a lean code. This car is rich as hell. It stunk so bad. The converter stunk so bad I worked on it outside because it was stinking the shop up. It was running that poorly and that rich because of this lying BS air fuel ratio sensor. Now notice when I stepped out of the throttle, it had no problem going lean. And the rear O2 went lean. And you can see where I stepped out of the throttle here. And of course, there's a little bit of latency. You got to get the volume out of the exhaust and it has to start reading. But this right here is why the sharpshooter was reading bad. Remember at the very first slide when I was good at idle, and as I accelerated, it got red. Well, guess what? 2.2 is a great number for an idling engine. That's perfect. But as I accelerated, it stayed at 2.2. Well, it should have been getting richer, and it wasn't. It was giving misinformation to the car's ECU, which is in turn giving misinformation to my sharpshooter. It's not a weakness of the tool. The tool reported exactly what it saw. Unfortunately, it saw bad stuff. If you do this test, if you go through the whole sharpshooter and you have a fuel issue, would you rather go back to the shop and hook gauges and all this bunch of stuff, or would you rather do one more test drive? And this right here tells me straight up, I do not have a fuel issue. The car ran like crazy, runs good, rear O2 went full rich. This guy did not even move. Let's look at the good capture. I did a few voltage checks at the shop, made sure the heater circuit was good. I put an air fuel ratio sensor in it, and now let's look at the good one. Remember that right there. Same test. Same PIDs, except for that one. That one snuck in on me. Don't worry about that guy. Okay, here we go. Wide open. My blue mark. I'm at 5138 RPM. Look at that. My front AF dropped down to 1.54. My rear O2 went to 0.092. And of course, my throttle is 89. This thing had thick floor mats. So remember what I said. The AF sensor, he comes down to the fence to meet his neighbor. He comes up to the fence to meet his neighbor and says, "How y'all doing?" Then the wife calls. You got to go back home. So you let out the gas. He shoots back lean. He goes down lean. This is proper information. Now, as we went through this video, how I was showing you the bad and the known good, well, the known goods obviously was after I replaced the part. And you see the big difference it made with the sharpshooter. Nothing wrong with it. It was just simply responding to the information it was given. And the information was BS. So, the sharpshooter between your ears has to be a little sharper than what's on this tool. Keep that in mind. And test, and retest. And if you think you did it wrong, test it again. So I hope you enjoyed this. In fact, the very next day I used this tool again to diagnose another issue, which may end up on YouTube. We'll see. You guys have a good one, and thank you guys for tuning in. If you go in the About section of my channel, the link to my channel is there. Please share that. If you guys are in Facebook clubs or any forums and some questions come up, or you know, "Ah, man, I know this crazy dude on YouTube," man, feel free to share my stuff. I put it out here for anyone to see. Everything's public. Everything's debatable. If any questions come up, I misspeak, by God, I'm willing to correct myself if somebody brings it to my attention. So my Instagram link is on there also. So like I said, guys, feel free to share this stuff. If you don't like what's going on, comment. Let me know, man. I can do things different or correct myself, or we can figure out what the problem might be. But I know what the problem was with this car. We had a BS front AF sensor. Have a good one.